Did you know that the average high school romance lasts about 3 weeks? Christine and Gerald Harris shattered that statistic, staying together for over 40 years. They met when she was a freshman and he a sophomore, forming a bond that seemed unbreakable, an enduring love story. But before you get too caught up in their fairy tale, here's a twist. Christine and I were married for 30 of those years, and I truly believe we were happy. Our marriage felt solid, and the birth of our daughter, Jean, only strengthened our bond. For 3 decades, I lived in contentment, convinced we had built something real. For context, my name is Todd Marsh, and Christine had been my devoted wife for those 30 years. Christine and Gerald's high school romance did come to an end, but only for a while. After graduation, Gerald left to work on the Alaskan pipeline with his uncle. That's when everything changed. He stopped reaching out, leaving Christine in limbo during her senior year. Despite dating someone else briefly, Christine's heart still belonged to Gerald. She waited for him like a loyal girlfriend, but Gerald was distant and rarely communicative. Apparently, he enjoyed working on the pipeline and embraced a nomadic lifestyle, assuming Christine was still waiting for him to make his fortune and sweep her off her feet upon his return. Well, that didn't exactly happen. Life moves on, and nothing stays the same. Christine went to college, earned her degree, and met me at a party when she was 24. I was a bit older than her at 29, but we were a good match. I fell in love with her the moment I met her, and I believe she felt the same about me. Our marriage was fairly normal, though there was one blemish on our courtship. 2 days before our wedding, a letter arrived from Gerald. Like the prodigal son, he was finally coming home and wanted her to meet him. Thankfully, Christine's mother convinced her not to go, urging her to focus on her new life and not waste herself on what she called that waste. After some tense emotional moments, during which I worried Christine might actually call off the wedding, she chose to proceed with the ceremony and became my wife, Mrs. Christine Marsh. By the time Gerald finally showed up, it was too late. Christine and I were already on our honeymoon. In his despair, Gerald apparently enlisted in the Marines. After the honeymoon, Christine and I settled into our new lives. She became a nurse, and I worked as an underwriter for a major insurance company. Insurance wasn't glamorous, but it was steady and paid the bills. Our marriage was solid, but one tiny issue kept resurfacing. Gerald started corresponding with Christine, and she eagerly wrote him back. When I questioned whether it was necessary, she grew indignant, insisting, "Oh, Todd, don't be jealous. He's an old friend who's lonely in the Marines, and I'm just writing to keep his spirits up." I couldn't claim ignorance. I knew he wrote her regularly, and I also knew she responded just as often. Neither her family nor I could convince her to stop writing until she received a letter informing her that Gerald had married a woman where he was stationed. That put an end to the correspondence, and my peace of mind returned. Over the next 3 years, I think Christine received only 3 Christmas cards from Gerald, and that was it. During this hiatus from Gerald, our daughter Jean was born. With our child's arrival, Christine and I came together like a well-matched team of mules, working tirelessly to build a home and secure enough equity to ensure Jean would have a good life. Those were good days, with both of us focused on raising and caring for our child. But, as always, something would come along to spoil it. One day, a letter arrived for Christine from Gerald. She never spoke about it, but I noticed our consumption of stamps increased afterward. I deduced her attention was turning back to Gerald, but I let it go. After all, he was off somewhere making the world safe, and I was here making our world safe from want. If they wanted to write to each other, it was their business, regardless of how I felt about it. Eventually, Christine began sharing some of Gerald's news with me. He had divorced his first wife but had since remarried. He had seen combat and was apparently highly decorated. I listened half-heartedly, but Christine spoke with pride about her Marine. When she called him a soldier, I corrected her, saying he would be upset by that, given that he was a Marine. Christine gave me a playful giggle and said, "Oops, I guess I'd better watch that." Watching her talk about him always depressed me, but I hoped she would eventually get over him and focus on her family. But she never did. Gerald remained in the Marines for 30 years, married and divorced 3 times, and amassed enough medals to make General Patton envious. With dismay, I realized that while Gerald had grown more glamorous in Christine's eyes over the years, I had only grown old and predictable. My one hope was that when Gerald was finally discharged, he would settle down somewhere far from us. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and that brings us to where we are now. Jean, our daughter, grew up and married a great guy named Francis Campbell. They have even better news. They're expecting their first child. I'm now 60 and looking forward to reaching that magic number of 65 so I can enjoy a few peaceful years of retirement. Christine still looks beautiful and can still make my heart race. Little did I know that my tranquil life was about to be shattered. It was a Thursday when I came home to find Christine dressed to the nines, announcing that we had a dinner reservation for 7 o'clock. At first, I panicked, thinking I had forgotten an anniversary or a birthday, but after a few quick calculations, I knew I hadn't. I played along, heading to our bedroom to clean up and try to look somewhat presentable next to Christine's elegance. Dinner was superb, and the restaurant was packed, which made me suspect Christine had more on her mind than just a good meal. Toward the end of our dinner, I looked at her and said, "All right, you can drop the bomb." I was in a good mood and determined not to cause a scene. One of my quirks is that I never lose my temper in public. Working in insurance teaches you to maintain composure where it can be seen, and that habit had spilled over into my personal life. Christine knew this well, and over the years, whenever she had something upsetting to tell me, she'd choose a public setting to break the news. Tonight felt different, though. After 30 years together, you learn to read your partner, and everything about Christine's demeanor was sending bad signals. I just knew whatever she had to say was going to ruin my night. With obvious trepidation, she finally broke the silence. "Todd, I think you should know that Gerald is back." A sudden wave of nausea hit me, but I was sure it wasn't the food I'd just eaten. I stared at her, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but Christine just looked at me pensively. The silence grew unbearable until I finally spoke. "When you say back, do you mean he's on leave?" She shook her head slowly and replied in a quiet voice, "No, Todd, he's not on leave. He's been discharged. And he bought a house 2 streets over from us." With those words, panic began to rise within me. I quickly interjected, "And he's going to live there with his 3rd wife?" Again, she answered softly, "No. He's gotten divorced again." But this time, he had to swallow some of his pride for the settlement. I struggled to contain my anger, but it seeped through as my voice rose just a bit too loudly. Some nearby patrons glanced over, startled by the sudden tension. But my frustration wasn't about Gerald's loss of pride. It was about him moving so close to us. I needed to understand his motivation. Taking a more assertive approach, I pressed Christine. "Have you seen Gerald?" Her expression gave me the answer before she even spoke. She hadn't responded yet when I fired my next question. "When? And how?" Christine looked just as uneasy as I felt. "He stopped by our house yesterday to let me know that we're now neighbors." My heart pounded wildly, but I forced myself to keep going with the interrogation, even while dreading what I might discover. "Did you sleep with him?" Her face gave away everything before she even stammered out, "I did, Todd, but it's not what you think." I looked straight into her eyes, my voice barely restrained. "What I'm thinking, Christine, is that my faithful wife has slept with someone other than her husband. So explain to me how that's not what I'm thinking." She replied, her voice wavering, "I did it because he needed me, Todd. When he came over, he looked so lost. He's suffering from PTSD or something, and with a divorce, he needed me terribly. I tried to help him. I love you, Todd, but I realized that I still love Gerald, too." There it was. My wife had slept with Gerald, who was using PTSD and his divorce as his ticket back into her heart and her bed. I locked eyes with her and spoke as decisively as I ever had in our entire marriage. "All right, Christine, the damage is done. We can move past this and rebuild our lives, but you can never sleep with him again. Do you understand me?" She looked at me, tears glistening in her eyes, her voice soft but resolute. "I can't promise that, Todd. I love him, and he needs me more than you do." I was stunned by her words, but painfully aware that a public restaurant was not the place to unravel our marriage. I called a waiter over and asked for the check. 10 minutes later, we were in the car driving home when I pressed her again. "Christine, how can you sleep with him knowing I am your husband? Didn't those vows mean anything to you? Nearly 30 years ago, we promised to forsake all others. Do you remember that?" She broke down, her sobs punctuating her words. "I'm sorry, Todd, but he needs me, and we found each other again. I can't bear the thought of losing him or you." I felt utterly paralyzed. What could I say or do to make her give him up? Anger seeped into my voice as I spoke louder. "So what's your plan? We take turns. He gets you for New Year's, but I get you for Christmas? Come on, Christine, you can't have 2 men. She stopped crying and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. "What about a leave of absence, Todd?" Now I was the one confused. "What the hell are you talking about, Christine?" She seemed to gain confidence as she explained. "Todd, remember about 18 years ago when you took a leave of absence for a year to go back to school and get your master's degree? You went, did what you needed to do, and then came back to your old position. Everything was fine." I shook my head, irritation flaring. "Christine, how can you compare me getting a degree that benefited our family and my career to this? What you're talking about only benefits the 2 of you." By then, we had pulled into our driveway. I switched off the engine. Christine reached out and gently touched my face, her eyes pleading. Todd, I missed my last year of high school with Gerald. If I'd had that year, we might not be facing this situation tonight. Give me that year, Todd. Let me get Gerald out of my system, and I promise you, I'll be the best wife I can be. I need that time, Todd. Please. I felt sadness, pain, shock, and betrayal all at once. And in that vulnerable, broken moment, I made the worst mistake of my life by allowing her that breach of faith. Fine, Christine. If that's what you want, then do whatever you please. But let me be perfectly clear, for that entire year, I don't want to see you or hear from you in any way. Is that understood? I had hoped the harsh terms I set would make her reconsider, that the severity of my ultimatum would dampen her enthusiasm. But it was all for nothing. She didn't seem to hear a word I said. After I reluctantly agreed, Christine reached over and kissed my cheek, her voice gentle but certain. Thank you, Todd. You'll see you won't regret this. I shook my head. Too late. I regret it already. That night, she tried to make love to me, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of her with Gerald made me sick, and the idea of being intimate felt impossible. As we prepared for bed, I grabbed my pillow and informed her I'd be sleeping in the guest room. I saw the pain in her eyes, and I was almost glad for it. Maybe it would make her reconsider where this so-called leave of absence would inevitably lead. The next morning, I woke up hoping last night had been nothing but a terrible mistake, that Christine would come to her senses by morning. But I was wrong. When I walked into the kitchen, she was making breakfast, looking as if she had just hit the jackpot. She smiled brightly at me and pointed to the calendar on the wall. I noticed the date June 6th circled in bold black ink. I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the date. On June 6th, 1944, thousands of soldiers and sailors had fought to liberate Europe from tyranny. Today, I was losing my wife to a different kind of oppressor. Christine was practically glowing as she set my breakfast down in front of me. I know you're worried, my love, but a year from today, I will come back to you and be yours alone. I need this time to work things through and get him out of my system. I promise you, you won't be sorry. She radiated confidence as she continued. I called Gerald this morning while you were still sleeping. I told him all about you giving me this leave of absence, and he's picking me up in an hour. My heart sank with every word, but I had to try one last time. Christine, you don't have to do this. Please, give it more time before making such a reckless decision. You can't be sure that a year will be enough to get over him. You just need to put him out of your mind and focus on fixing our marriage. I'm begging you don't risk destroying us. She smiled at me with a pitying sweetness, as if I was hopelessly naive. Todd, I know how much you love me, and by giving me this time, you're proving that. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. In the end, I'll be back, and our marriage will be stronger for it. Her tone was as breezy as ever. Now, I have to finish packing, sweetheart. So go ahead and eat your breakfast. And just like that, she walked out of the kitchen, and for all intents and purposes, out of our marriage, too. I forced myself to finish eating, though everything tasted like ash. Then I got up and went to our bedroom to get dressed. When I entered, I saw Christine's 3 large suitcases packed with her clothes and toiletries. She looked at me and said sweetly, I guess I have everything I need. Will you be a dear and take these bags to the porch for Gerald? I looked at her blankly before replying no. The shock on her face was evident. She clearly hadn't expected that answer. After my blunt refusal, I followed my words by heading upstairs. If you're dead set on destroying 30 years of marriage, then you can haul your own bags out. I won't help you in any way to crawl into that jerk's bed. Got it. Christine looked like she was on the verge of tears before snapping back. He is not a jerk. Gerald is a wonderful man and a hero who served our country. That's more than you ever did. I looked away, muttering bitterly. Yeah, he got medals 3 meals a day and traveled the world while I spent 5 days a week working to provide for you and our daughter. I guess you're right, it was nothing. Christine dragged her luggage downstairs, her expression full of contempt with every trip she made. Within minutes, a car pulled into the driveway, and a man who could only be Gerald got out and began loading her bags from the porch. Christine called out to him that she'd be right there, then turned back and walked inside to face me one last time. We stood there awkwardly, facing each other. I broke the silence first. If you're really going through with this foolishness, remember the ground rules. I don't want to see you or speak to you for the entire year. I could see reality starting to pierce her fevered fantasy, her voice dropping to a meek reply. I understand, Todd, but it'll work out, you'll see. Remember you agreed to give me a year. She waited for me to respond, but I remained silent. Finally, with a confused and pained expression, she whispered, I really do love you. She leaned in to kiss me on the lips, but I turned my face away at the last moment, so her lips only grazed my cheek. I can't kiss you knowing you're about to go to him, I said rapidly. Her eyes filled with tears before she spun around and ran from the house, straight into his arms. From the front door, I watched her kiss him deeply, and rage erupted from some dark corner of my soul. 2 minutes later, my driveway was as empty as my heart, and the truth settled in I had just lost my wife to another man. I called in sick to work that morning and went straight to the hardware store for new locks. All morning, I busied myself replacing every lock in the house and changing the security codes on the alarm system. The good news was that the work kept me occupied and my mind distracted from Christine. But when I was done, the sadness returned like a wave crashing on the shore. Next, I did what any heartbroken man might do. I unplugged the house phone and embarked on a desperate quest to drown the pain in alcohol. My binge lasted through Sunday morning. When I finally ran out of booze, it was almost a relief. I felt like I was dying physically, spiritually, and mentally. I stumbled into bed and fell into a deep, empty sleep, only to be awoken by a loud pounding somewhere in the house. I woke up slowly, stumbling around to find the source of the relentless noise, which turned out to be my daughter Jean pounding on the front door. When I let her in, she looked stunned by my disheveled appearance and the stale odor of alcohol that filled the entire house. Her first words were, "What the hell is going on, Dad?" I tried to focus, but the pounding in my skull made it nearly impossible. I managed to croak out, "What do you mean?" She stared at me like I had grown a second head at that moment. I wondered if I had. Grabbing my arm, she steered me toward the kitchen. "You need coffee and food, Dad. Then you're going to explain to me what brought all this on." An hour later, with some food in my stomach and coffee in my hand, I told her everything I knew about her mother and Gerald. Saying she was shocked would be an understatement. "Dad, let me get this straight. Mom wants a leave of absence from your marriage for a year to reconnect with her old high school flame and let the romance run its course?" I nodded. "Yep, that's about it." Her next words were the same ones I had been asking myself since Friday. "What are you going to do, Dad?" I looked at her, and the words spilled from my lips without conscious thought. "Tomorrow, I'm calling in sick again and going to see a lawyer." She looked saddened and started making excuses for her mother. "I can't believe Mom would do something like that. Could it be a mental breakdown?" My expression was blank as I replied woodenly, "I have no idea, Jean." She stared at me with a sadness I had never seen on her face before. "I don't know what to say, Dad. I want to tell you to think about it, but to be honest, it sounds like your best option." Jean stayed with me for a few more hours, even making dinner for me to eat later. When she left, she kissed me and repeated how sorry she was. Just as she was heading out the door, I asked, "Why did you show up today anyway?" She met my eyes. "Mom called and asked me to come by and check on you." But she never told me why or where she was. I nodded as if I understood, though I didn't. "Okay, well, thanks, and drive carefully, sweetheart." On Monday, I did call in sick and went to see a lawyer. The conclusion was clear. While a divorce would be a slam dunk for me based on spousal abandonment and could potentially prevent her from claiming half of my retirement, the rest of the marital assets were still up for grabs. For the first time, I realized that Christine's year-long absence might be the perfect opportunity to reduce the assets she could claim. The next 3 weeks went by quickly. I was surprised by how easily I adjusted to being alone. The upside was the feeling of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I no longer felt responsible for another person. The downside was the loneliness waking up alone and going to bed alone. I didn't see or hear from Christine until mid-July. I had stopped in for a few drinks on a Saturday at Flynn's, an upscale tavern in town. I was sitting at the bar when the two of them walked in, hand in hand like infatuated teenagers. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even notice me sitting there. As I watched them, I took particular note of Gerald. He was well-built and moderately attractive enough to explain Christine's attraction. But what struck me most was how he seemed to dominate her. She catered to his every whim, hanging on his words, moving to accommodate him with an almost desperate devotion. When she got up to go to the ladies' room, she finally noticed me at the bar and gave me a tentative smile. After leaving the restroom, she hesitantly approached me. "Hi, Todd. How have you been?" I wanted to tell her to leave me alone, but I kept my composure and forced a polite smile. "Oh, about as well as one can expect when your wife of 30 years leaves you for some piece of scum. What else can I do for you?" She looked taken aback by my sarcasm, but held her ground. "Todd, I need to get back into the house. I left some personal things there, and when I tried the other day, my key wouldn't work." I kept smiling, my tone as friendly as I could make it. "Oh, wow, Christine. Sorry about that. But you shouldn't be surprised your key doesn't work at my house. You no longer live there. As for getting back in, I don't think so. But thanks for asking." She just stood there, her expression bewildered. "You'd better get back to your boyfriend before he gets all worked up," I added, my voice dripping with disdain. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes as she spun around and hurried away. I turned my attention back to my drink, more interested in finishing it than dealing with her. 2 minutes later, I felt a rough hand clamp down on my shoulder as I was spun around in my chair to face a very angry-looking Gerald. "Hey, you made my girl cry," he snapped. I could sense he was gearing up to punch me, and my heart raced. The guy looked like he could end me before anyone could intervene. But somehow, I found the nerve to respond with more conviction than I felt. "Hold on there, Spartacus. If anyone has a right to be angry, it's me. She's my wife you're talking about, not your girl. And since you stole her, you don't have any right to say a damn thing about what goes on between us. Now, let's get this straight, asshole. Sure, you can punch me out and impress her, but how impressed do you think the cops will be when they haul you off?" I could see the gears turning in his head, and it was clear Gerald wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. But his hesitation gave me enough courage to press on. "Now, genius, you've got two choices. 1, punch me out and enjoy spending a year in jail. Or 2, back off and go plant your dumb ass back in your seat." My heart pounded in my chest, and a part of my brain screamed at me, questioning why I had provoked him. He could kill you, it warned. But I maintained my facade of bravado as Gerald stood there, weighing his options. Thankfully, the manager approached just then, asking if there was a problem. Gerald shot him a belligerent look before muttering, "Nothing," and then turned away, retreating slowly. 5 minutes later, they paid their bill and left. That night, as I drove home, I couldn't stop wondering what personal item Christine had been so desperate to retrieve from the house. Determined to find out, I spent about 3 hours rummaging through cabinets and drawers without success. Then, I pulled out the drawers from her bureau. Underneath them, I discovered letters addressed to Christine from Gerald. As I read through them, it became painfully clear that this so-called year away with Gerald had been in the works for a long time. One letter, dated 5 years earlier, read, "It's a relief to know you still want me as much as I want you. When I come home, I want us to be together, so you'll have to find some way of getting rid of that husband of yours." Going through them all was like reading a sleazy romance novel. Many of the letters detailed either Gerald's fantasies of what he intended to do with Christine or reminisced about what they had done in high school. By the time I finished, the thought of being without Christine felt far easier to accept. I didn't see or hear from Christine until September 1st, my birthday. Coming home from work that evening, I found a covered pot and a birthday card sitting on the porch. Taking them inside, I discovered she had made pot roast my favorite. The card wished me a happy birthday, but she had also written, "Todd, I know we aren't supposed to communicate, but I couldn't ignore the birthday of a man I love so much. I dream about us every night, my love, and I know that when this year is over, I will be yours completely, and he will be gone. Please don't ever stop loving me or give up on us. Christine." Since Christine had left, Jean had been keeping pretty close tabs on me. She called me that night to wish me a happy birthday. After some small talk, she finally got around to the real reason for her call. "Dad, my due date is in 3 weeks, right? How could I forget?" I replied, feeling a swell of joy at the thought of my first grandchild. "Yes, I know, sweetheart. You and Francis must be so excited." There was a brief pause before she continued. "Dad, Francis, and I went out to dinner with Mom and Gerald. Mom wants to be there when my baby is born, and she wants Gerald to be with her. I know you and Mom agreed not to communicate during the year, but can you make an exception for me just this once, please?" I was surprised to learn Jean and her husband had dined with them, but I wasn't about to let that spoil the anticipation of my grandchild's birth. "Okay, Jean. She can come and bring him along if she must." Jean corrected me immediately. "Dad, stop calling him names. He's not that bad of a guy, actually. And he's making Mom really happy." I hadn't seen her so euphoric in years. Her words caught me off guard, and a surge of anger flared within me as I snapped, "Well, first you're all having dinner together, and now you're defending him. Whatever he has, I wish I could bottle it. Pretty soon, he'll have taken my entire family from me. Just out of curiosity, when are you going to start calling him Dad?" Jean responded quickly, her voice filled with regret. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. I can only imagine how you're feeling, and I really am sorry." I cut off her apology, my tone cold. "It's all right. Forget it. Listen, I've got something on the stove I need to tend to." She said she loved me before ending the call. It was then that I realized my life would never be the same. It was time to start fighting back. First, I needed to begin liquidating my assets to lower my net worth. Second, I had to shake off my funk and start engaging with the world again. The next few days were busy. I consulted my lawyer for advice on handling my assets legally. Then I bought a taser for self-protection, figuring that if Gerald confronted me again, I wouldn't rely on words to save me. After that, I booked a trip to Vegas for October. Finally, I went online to find a woman around my age who might be interested in a stable, long-term relationship. Regarding my assets, my lawyer confirmed that, with Christine not living with me, I was free to manage or disperse them as I saw fit. That freedom opened up possibilities for the future. When Jean delivered her baby, I was at work. My secretary took the call from her husband, Francis, who was ecstatic to announce I now had a grandson. I congratulated him and told him I'd be right over. When I reached the hospital and found Jean's room, I approached the door and accidentally overheard her talking with Christine. "Mom, what you're doing to Dad is unbelievably senseless," Jean said, her frustration evident. "Do you really want to lose him for Gerald?" Christine's voice was calm and soothing. "Don't get upset, Jean. I'm not going to lose your dad. He loves me too much to ever let me go. Besides, what I have with Gerald right now is magical. It's hard to describe, but every day feels like it did in high school, only better now that we can be together. He treats me like I'm his princess, and every night he cares for me. I've never experienced such incredible moments in my life. I'll truly miss it when I go back to your father." Jean sounded disgusted. "Mom, I don't want to hear about you and Gerald's relationship. I admit he's a good guy, and you two seem to fit well together, but I want my baby to have grandparents who are together, not divorced or constantly fighting. Please, Mom, you need to go back to Dad. Do it for his sake." Christine's voice was dismissive. "It's too late. Your dad might be boring, predictable, and definitely not in Gerald's league, but he'll always be there for you. Gerald is a dreamboat, no doubt," Jean admitted, "but sooner or later, all boats sail away. Dad, on the other hand, is a rock he'll never leave you. If you make this right, if you have to beg him on your knees, do it. Just get him to take you back." She paused for a moment before adding an impassioned plea. "Mom, don't wait too long, or I'm afraid you'll lose him." Christine's voice was filled with certainty, showing just how deluded she was. "You don't have to worry about your dad and me. When the time comes that I'm over Gerald, he'll gladly take me back." Jean's voice held a note of skepticism. "I understand that you think you know Dad, but I've seen and talked to him. He's definitely changing, and not for the better. He seems bitter and more detached since you left him. Are you really willing to risk 30 years of a good marriage just to be with your high school crush?" I had heard enough. Choosing that moment to enter the room, I forced a smile and called out, "Hey, Mommy. Congratulations on your new son. You too must be delighted." I went straight to Jean and hugged her, deliberately ignoring Christine. I knew it was immature, but ignoring her was becoming easier. Christine shot me a dirty look, but Jean was beaming as she asked, "Did you see him yet, Dad?" I shook my head. "No, baby, I came straight up to check on you." Finally, tired of being snubbed, Christine interjected in a less-than-friendly tone, "Hello, Todd. How have you been?" I looked at her briefly, before responding politely but indifferently, "Good." Then I turned back to Jean, asking about the delivery and what they had decided to name the baby. At my last question, Jean's face lit up. "Francis and I both agree we want to name our baby Todd after you, Dad." Christine's expression darkened, and without another word, she quietly left the room, saying she was going to see the baby. Once she was gone, I took Jean's hands in mine, my tone turning serious. "Jean, you already know that your mom and I probably aren't going to make it." I saw the truth of my words hit her hard. "No, Dad, don't say that. She'll come around soon and come home again." I felt my eyes mist as I continued, "Baby, I realize now that I was never enough for your mother. That explains why she kept writing to him all these years. Something has to change." Her face registered shock and disbelief. "What?" I gave her a sad smile. "In the next few months, I'm going to start divorce proceedings once I get everything in order." Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Oh, Dad, I told Mom she should be begging you to come back, but it really is too late, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yes. I couldn't take her back now. The memories of her betrayal would be too much for me. But please don't tell her anything yet, all right?" She nodded, then pulled me down for a kiss. We talked for a few more minutes about various topics, carefully avoiding any mention of my wife or her boyfriend. Eventually, I told Jean I'd be back tomorrow and left her to see the baby. I made my way to the nursery and spotted my grandson among all the newborns. I was struck by how small and delicate he was, and I realized he was absolutely beautiful. Francis approached me with a warm smile, positioning himself between me and Christine and Gerald. Handing me a cigar, he said, "Here, Dad. Have a smoke to celebrate." I slipped the cigar into my pocket and clapped him on the back. "I'll save it for later, son." "Thank you." Watching Christine and Gerald holding hands like infatuated teenagers made my stomach turn. "Look, Francis, I'll come back tomorrow when it's less crowded, if you know what I mean." Francis gave me a knowing smile. I understand completely, Dad, and I don't blame you a bit. As I began to leave, Christine called out to me sheepishly. Todd, it feels like just yesterday we were bringing our baby home, and now she has a baby of her own. I don't know where the time went, but it went by too fast. I glanced at her, still holding Gerald's hand, and replied as indifferently as I could. Well, Christine, it looks like you two now have all the time in the world. She looked puzzled as I walked away, leaving them standing there. October rolled around, and it turned out to be the best month I'd had since Christine left. I took a trip to Vegas, planning to hit the tables and use my losses as an excuse to draw down our joint assets. But what truly made the trip worthwhile was a woman I met there. Her name was Miranda, a mature woman in her 50s. I was surprised she was still in her line of work, but she explained that many men preferred the experience and charm of an older woman. In my case, she was right. Miranda was expensive, but she made me feel more alive than I had in years. For the first time since Christine left, I didn't miss her at all. Miranda was engaging, both as company and beyond, and she seemed genuinely interested in me. By the end of the night, she knew as much about my situation as I did. Miranda was stunned by my story, and as she prepared to leave that night, she gently caressed my face. Todd, I've only known you a few hours, but I want to tell you something important. You are a good man, and that's rare. Trust me, I would know. I've seen and been with thousands of men, and I can count on one hand the number I truly liked and respected. You're one of them. Her gaze softened. Your wife doesn't realize what she's losing, but don't let her actions change who you are. You're honest and good, and those are your strengths. Don't let bitterness corrupt them. And if you ever come back to town, call me. I'd really like to see you again. Miranda in Vegas left me feeling more conflicted than when I'd arrived. But as I replayed Miranda's words in my mind, I realized she had a valid point. I had every intention of making Christine pay for her betrayal, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she had been a good wife and mother for 30 years before it happened. No, I would be fair. I'd walk away from this marriage broke, but with my integrity intact. When I returned from Vegas, I instructed my lawyer to start preparing the divorce paperwork to be finalized by the end of the year. At the same time, I realized I needed to know more about Gerald. On my lawyer's recommendation, I hired a firm to investigate his history from high school to the present. The firm was costly, but I didn't care. Half of the expense would ultimately come from Christine's share. They were known for their thoroughness and assured me they would have all the information I requested before Christmas. I also spoke to my boss about the possibility of relocating within the company. At first, he was taken aback since I had always been adamant about staying in one place. But that was back when I had a family to stay for. He agreed to make inquiries at the home office and promised to get back to me. Thanksgiving was the next challenge to overcome. About a week before the holiday, Jean called to invite me to dinner. When I asked if her mother and the other would be there, she hesitated before admitting they would. That was all I needed to hear. I firmly declined and hung up. To my surprise, it was my son-in-law Francis who reached out next. He called my office and asked to meet. We settled on a bar downtown, one convenient to both our workplaces, for a quiet drink that evening. When we met, I could tell Francis was agitated. After exchanging greetings, I ordered 2 scotches, sensing that something was weighing on him. I leaned back and let him talk. Dad, you wouldn't believe the 2 of them. It's Gerald this and Gerald that. You think he was the guy from the beer commercial, the most interesting man in the world. Francis paused to take a sip of his drink. I was surprised. I had assumed he wanted to convince me to join them for Thanksgiving, but now I wasn't so sure. I had to ask, so Francis, does this mean you're not a fan of the esteemed Mr. Harris? Francis's expression darkened with anger. Dad, that man is an arrogant, self-absorbed blowhard. He loves himself so much that I don't see how he has anything left over for Christine. Realizing how blunt he had been, his face fell, and he quickly backtracked. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean any disrespect. I gave him a reassuring smile. Don't worry about it, son. But tell me, when did you start calling her Christine instead of Mom? He looked down, almost ashamed. Since she left you. I lost all respect for her after that. I was intrigued. Why does it bother you so much that she left me? His face clouded with anger again. I'm sure you've noticed that in all the time I've been with Jean, I've never talked about my parents. And I always appreciated that you and Christine never asked. The truth is, my mother cheated on my father. They split up after that, and my dad never recovered. Francis continued, his expression twisted with pain. He drank himself to an early grave, and my mom died in a car wreck with her lover. I can't stand cheaters, and now that Christine's become one, I can barely tolerate her. I put up a front for Jean's sake, but I'm worried. I hadn't known about Francis's parents before, and I could feel his pain. But his concern seemed deeper than that. Francis, you say you're worried. What's bothering you, son? He took a long drink and ordered another round before facing me. This might upset you, but you know the old saying like mother, like daughter. It terrifies me. If Christine has turned into a cheater and keeps going on about how amazing it all is, how long before Jean starts thinking it's worth trying out herself? If one person is cheating, how long before there's two? I raised an eyebrow at that. I see your point. I took a sip of my drink, letting the implications sink in. Listen, Francis, don't lose hope. I have some things in motion, and I believe things will start changing by the new year. And just between us, I got some plans that should make Christmas a good one for you and Jean, though not so much for others, if you catch my drift. Francis finally cracked a smile, and for the next 15 minutes, he tried to pry details from me, but I kept my plans under wraps. As we were wrapping up, I grinned at him. Haven't you forgotten something, Francis? He looked puzzled. Not that I can think of, Dad. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. Aren't you supposed to try and convince me to be the bigger man and come over for Thanksgiving? Francis's grin widened. All right. Okay. Are you coming for Thanksgiving, Dad? I shook my head. No, but I appreciate the invitation. Jean called me 2 more times before Thanksgiving, pleading for me to come. I finally had to lay it out plainly for her. Look, Jean, when your mother left me for that thing last June, I told her there would be no communication between us for the entire year she walked away from our marriage. I already broke that rule once when little Todd was born, but I won't sit at a table and break bread with him. Understood? Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it alone with a frozen dinner. It was lonely and painful, but it was still better than watching Christine and Gerald making eyes at each other. December arrived, bringing with it the looming dread of another family holiday. But I reminded myself that this would be the last one I'd have to endure. Fortunately, December proved to be a productive month. First, the company offered me a position in Spokane, Washington, starting in January if I was interested. I told them I was. Second, the private investigator's report on Gerald came back, and it was a bombshell. Gerald had been married 3 times, each ending in divorce due to his infidelity. He had 2 children from women outside of those marriages, for whom he was still paying child support. His most recent ex-wife had even managed to claim half of his pension in their divorce. To top it off, Gerald had been busted down from E8 to E6 during his final year in the Corps. Morally and financially, the man was on shaky ground. The final piece of good news was that Christine would be served with divorce papers before the holidays. The first working day after Christmas, yes, I was definitely feeling the holiday spirit now. I called Jean to ask about Christmas plans, and once again, she pleaded with me to make the baby's first holiday a true family affair. When I asked if Gerald would be attending, Jean's tone shifted, irritated. Dad, you might as well get used to it. He's part of our family now, whether you like it or not. I cut her off firmly. You're right, I don't like it. But for the baby's sake, I'll be there. Jean seemed genuinely thrilled. Thank you, Daddy. This will make everyone so happy. I was fairly certain it wouldn't, but I kept that thought to myself. 2 days later, after coming home from work, I heard the phone ringing. Without thinking, I picked it up. Hello? There was a long, awkward silence. Just as I was about to hang up, a hesitant voice finally spoke. Todd, I could have been knocked over with a feather. What's wrong, C? Are you hurt? Her voice was timid. No, I'm fine, Todd. I just wanted to thank you for agreeing to come to Christmas. I know I've hurt you, and I'm starting to realize just how much. But I needed to tell you that I'm grateful because we've never been apart for any holiday in the last 30 years. Thanksgiving was miserable without you, and I've been thinking so much about us lately. I cut her off before she could continue down memory lane. Well, Christine, I'm glad to hear you think about us once in a while. But let's not forget you were the one who started this whole leave of absence nonsense. From the beginning, I made it clear there would be no communication between us. I made an exception for one-day Christmas. That's it. And with that, I think we should end this call. Goodbye. As I hung up, a wave of guilt washed over me. In all our 30 years together, I had never spoken to her so harshly. But no matter how bad I felt about my words, it didn't compare to how terrible I felt the day she walked out on me. The month dragged on, but I managed to finish my Christmas shopping with plenty of time to spare. I made sure to have gifts for everyone on Christmas Day. Meanwhile, I packed up everything I needed for my new job and rented a U-Haul for the cross-country drive. A kind woman from my new office reached out, letting me know she had found a few nice furnished apartments close to work. The best part? She planned to personally show them to me when I arrived in Spokane. Yes, December was shaping up pretty well. On Christmas Day, I arrived at Jean and Francis's house to find that Christine and her other were already there. Jean greeted me with a big hug as I walked in, arms full of presents. She made a passing remark about how unexpected my arrival was before hurrying back to the kitchen to finish preparing dinner. I simply smiled, thinking if she only knew what a surprise was in store. Francis shook my hand and took my coat as I quickly asked, "Can I see my grandson?" Francis nodded. "He's in the nursery for a nap, but you can peek in." I quietly slipped into the room and gazed at the tiny sleeping form before me. A wave of emotion swept over me, knowing I would soon be leaving him behind. But I understood I couldn't stay. I sensed movement behind me and turned slightly as Christine silently stepped up beside me. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me. This was where she should have been since June, by my side. She looked over at me and, in a hushed tone, said, "We have a beautiful grandson, Todd." A deep sadness filled me as I responded, "Yes, Christine. But who will he grow up calling Grandpa? Me or both?" Christine looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Why, silly, you're the only grandfather this child will ever have." I quietly murmured, "Let's hope you're right, Christine," before leaving the room. The next few hours were interesting. Francis and I socialized while Jean, Christine, and Gerald seemed wrapped up in their own little world. I couldn't hide my disappointment in how quickly my daughter had fallen under Gerald's influence. Francis, on the other hand, looked outright disgusted. I leaned over and reassured him, "Hang in there. Things are going to change tonight." He gave me a conspiratorial grin and whispered, "I hope so, Dad. I can't stand this situation much longer." At this rate, he'll be making a play for Jean soon. Dinner was served, and while the food was delicious, the company left much to be desired. I had no interest in making conversation with either Christine or her partner, and Francis seemed just as unwilling. The only person who talked was Gerald, boasting to the women about his courage and fortitude in the face of the enemy. Watching him hold court with his small, devoted audience made me sick. After dinner, Jean brought the baby into the living room, and we all sat together. I took in the scene, knowing this was likely the last time I would ever experience such a family gathering. Jean, eager and animated, told Francis to get the gifts. As he brought them in, she passed them around. Christine received a sweater, Gerald a gift card, and I got a tie. Simple, uninspired gifts, much like how I imagine my wife and daughter now saw me. When Francis, Jean, and the baby opened their gifts from Christine and Gerald, Jean beamed with delight, laughing and thanking them profusely. Francis, however, remained polite but distant. With the gift exchange seemingly over, the room grew quiet as everyone turned toward me, eyeing the bag I had brought. Breaking the silence, I finally spoke. "I'd like to end this wonderful day by giving you all the gifts you truly deserve this holiday." I stood up, reached into my bag, and handed Jean and Francis a large envelope wrapped in festive holiday paper. Jean tore the paper off eagerly, while Francis stood by, watching with curiosity. As she pulled out the papers and scanned them, her face lit up with sheer joy. Christine, now perched at the edge of her seat, looked on anxiously, eager to know what was inside. Jean didn't keep her waiting. Practically screaming with excitement, she announced, "Oh man, Daddy gave us your house free and clear. We can finally move out of this rental. Isn't that great?" Jean exclaimed, her excitement filling the room. But Christine's face fell, her expression turning to one of deep concern as she looked at me. "Why did you do that, Todd? Where are we going to live?" I offered her a reassuring look, hoping to ease her anxiety. "Don't worry, Christine. I have everything planned out. Here, this is for you." I handed her a small box wrapped in colorful paper. With tentative hope, she unwrapped it and found a bracelet inside. Astonishment etched across her face as she lifted it from the box. "Look at the inside, Christine." "I had it inscribed," I said, noticing Gerald's scowl growing deeper at the sight of my gift. Christine slowly turned the bracelet over, her eyes reading the words engraved inside. "Thank you for the best 30 years of my life, Todd." I glanced at Gerald, his expression was a storm brewing, clearly displeased with the attention Christine was giving the bracelet. Christine looked back at me, confused. "Todd, thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful. But you didn't put love on the inscription." I smiled, though there was nothing warm about it. "I'm sorry about that, Christine, but I didn't want to lie. I've been losing my love for you steadily over the past few months. This bracelet is my way of saying goodbye and will be a reminder of what you gave up for your happiness." Her face crumpled with disbelief and despair. I could hear Jean's sharp intake of breath as I continued. "I also need to tell you that you're going to be served with divorce papers on Monday." I nodded toward the card inside the box. In the card, I tried to express my thanks for giving me so many wonderful years and a beautiful daughter. There's also a check for half of our liquid assets. The house was mine to give since you walked away from the marriage willingly, but all of that is explained in the card as well. I glanced over at Gerald, whose expression was now one of pure rage. This next gift is more for the two of you. I handed Christine another large envelope, her hand shaking as she took it. Inside is a complete history of what your partner here has been doing since you two parted ways back in high school. Apparently, he never quite grasped the Marine motto Semper Fidelis. I think you'll find it fascinating reading. Before I could finish my sentence, Gerald let out a furious roar and lunged at me, bellowing, "I'll kill you, you son of a—" But Gerald never reached me. He collapsed to the floor, twitching violently as my taser made contact. Jean and Christine both jumped to their feet, eyes wide with shock. I pressed the taser against Gerald's twitching body again, ensuring he wasn't about to get back up anytime soon. Leaning close to him, I hissed, "It hurts, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, your pain is nothing compared to losing the woman you loved for 30 years to someone like you." Christine sobbed uncontrollably, her world crumbling around her. I turned to her, my voice steady and cold. "I know you think I'm boring and that I don't care for you the way Sergeant York here does." I jabbed the taser into Gerald again, unable to resist the satisfaction of watching him convulse. With a twisted smile, I murmured to no one in particular, "That is never going to get old." Turning back to Christine, I spoke with more bravado than I truly felt, the bitterness heavy in my voice. "Anyway, I know about your feelings for this man, so I'm giving you the best gift of all, Christine, your freedom. You can spend the rest of your life being treated like a princess during the day, having your needs attended to at night. Isn't that what you wanted?" Christine looked utterly shattered, her voice cracking as she choked out, "No, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I was going to come back to you in June. Todd, I love you." Christine's voice trembled as violently as a leaf caught in a raging windstorm. Jean rushed to her mother's side, trying to console her, while I delivered another jolt from the taser. Francis's nervous voice cut through the chaos. "You better not do that again. You might seriously hurt him." I rose to my feet, looking down my writhing nemesis, then at the two women I loved more than life itself. "I'll be leaving now. Thank you for a memorable day, and have a great life. I won't be seeing either of you for quite some time." Both women stared at me, speechless and horrified, as if I were a stranger to them. Francis had retrieved my coat and handed it to me with a satisfied grin. Before leaving, I turned to Jean. For the first time in her life, she looked at me with genuine fear. "Jean, let this be a warning. If you become someone you're not, there will be consequences." I walked over to the bassinet where little Todd gazed up at me, his innocent eyes searching mine. Gently, I stroked his cheek with my finger. "So long, little guy. Maybe I'll see you around someday, but I have a feeling that's not likely." Still smiling, I moved toward the door. As I opened it, I looked back at the stunned room and offered a final farewell. "Happy New Year, folks." By the time I reached my car, the shock must have worn off, or maybe Gerald was starting to regain consciousness because I heard a desperate voice scream, "No." I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I considered that Vegas was sort of on my way to Spokane, and I wouldn't mind seeing Miranda again. As I backed out, I noticed Francis stepping outside, smiling and waving at me. I returned the wave before heading west toward a new life. Dear listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss future updates.